Hello, how you guys doing? So my name is Winston. This is the Sir Winston podcast, and right now I'm doing like kind of like interviews of all other artists. I see you guys doing like a clothing line. So can you please tell me what clothing line do you guys, the name and what's your mission?
Cool.
Well, we're Unknown Union. We're a brand. Originally, we were based out of South Africa. That's where we started the brand, just because of the creative spirit and the energy that was there. It had been a place that we were traveling for a long time. Jason and I, this is my brother, super nerds. So our brand's a little different than other fashion brands where they start with the design and then they end up doing storytelling. We start with the storytelling and the research, and we use that to drive design.
Yeah, so basically the mission of the brand is, Jennifer and I, the first gift that our father gave us when we were 18 years old was a book by Chancellor Williams called Destruction of Black Civilization. And what that book did is it started really unveiling to us history about what it was to be a black person that we had never been told by somebody who was at the time the foremost authority in his field. And I think it's like with all things, like when you begin researching about yourself and asking questions about yourself, then, and especially when those questions relate to, where do I come from and what is my history? And you realize that the answer to that is it's not what you've been told, then it opens up your mind really to start deconstructing a lot of things that you've been taught over time. And you begin to look into, okay, well, if this is true about me, then what about other people? And so a lot of what Unknown Union is about is finding those amazing stories, amazing histories, amazing perspectives that have been shared by human beings over the course of our history, and using fashion as a vehicle for communicating those ideas. So essentially that's what Unknown Union is. So there isn't one culture, one history, one people that we're trying to tell. We spend the time, and we've actually been really blessed to be supported by world-class institutions from around the world that help us to tell the stories in an authentic and a responsible way. But we spend our time doing the research. Once we've then identified like the narrative that we want to communicate, that's really when our design work begins. It doesn't, as Jennifer said, it doesn't begin with like, it'd be really dope to create something that looks like X, Y, and Z. No, rather we dig into the story, and then the story informs us as to what the design is supposed to be. So there's no seasons for us. There's no set schedule. It's all about letting the story that has been shared with us be researched and then communicated and absorbed by us and to inspire us. And then it's like, okay, that in that kind of creative energy is what ends up being distilled into each capsule collection that we create at Unknown Union.
That is awesome. I love the mission and how the way that you like to share a little bit of backstory about African American and African culture and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in your in your designs and stuff. So what inspires both of you? Like what inspires you? I'll start with your sister first. What inspires you?
And then... I think inspiration we find everywhere. I love to read. I grew up loving to read. I also grew up doing art and sketching and those sort of things. Our father, who my brother mentioned earlier, was big in the art industry he used to buy and resell paintings. So a lot of our childhood, where other kids would go to summer camp, I spent in dusty museum libraries, reading through books, learning how to decode paintings. So for me, like, I really vibe in those things. Like, I love art. I love creators. I love learning, right? I don't want to be a person that ever stops doing those things. So digging into those stories, finding more, discovering more, it helps me, I think, not only relate to myself and find new thoughts and ideas and expand my mind, but it also helps guide me with how I interact with others, right? Because if I have a better understanding of something that derives from their culture, something that derives from history, I can now have conversations that I couldn't have before. There's a quote that I love that says, "A mind once introduced to a new idea never returns to its original dimensions." And for me, that's kind of what inspires me. That's what drives me, right? I'm always looking for ways to expand my dimensions, right? We only have one life. So I want to live it in a quest for greater understanding, greater knowledge, in that search. So that's probably what inspires me is art, creation, and knowledge. I know enough to know I don't know a lot.
Wow. What about you? What inspires you?
For me, definitely, it's very similar. I'm inspired, honestly, by us, by the human race. I mean, we spend so much time trying to think about how we're different from one another, but and when we do it, it feels like we're always looking at a history that maybe stretches back 20 years or 10 years or 40 years or 100 years or 200 years. But the reality is human beings, right? We've got archaeological sites where human beings had functioning societies 60,000 years ago. So, and then we're told that, okay, at the same time, human beings were separated. That's the narrative that we've been given. Like, okay, there are people that were way over there, and then there are people that were way over there and isolated, right? But then what history is showing us and what the research is showing us is that, no, that's not at all even remotely close to the truth. We talk about Columbus. The narrative when we learn when we're in school is, okay, Columbus discovered America. Okay, if you want to say that that's the first time a European came to the United States, at least you would be closer. But even then, you're still wrong. They've got evidence of Vikings Vikings had been there long before, and many other people traveled from long before. We've got trade routes through China and Africa and across the Atlantic. So I guess what inspires me, like I said, is us, like as human beings. We have the same thoughts, the same weaknesses, the same hopes, the same dreams, the same fallibilities that humans have had since the beginning of time. So I want to see, like, okay, cool, across that entire span of time, what were the best ideas that cultures and societies like produced? Let's bring all of those ideas, not just the ideas of all of our contemporaries who are alive today. Let's bring the ideas of everybody that's even existed long before. And then as a modern day people, like you and I, as we're talking right now, now let's take and pick and choose which ones we identify with to create a better humanity, a better society, a better world. Let's not just learn from the information we've gathered over 10 years or 20 years or 100 years. Let's look at the information that human beings have gathered over millennia. And let's use that knowledge to actually build something really special. So that inspires me. And then just like Jennifer, I think the part of the journey where it's like I continue to find something new that shifts me. Every single time I find something that inspires me in terms of knowledge or information, it changes me slightly. It always does. So it's this constant development, and the freedom of expression, the freedom of thought, the perspective of all these contributions has made me, I live a fuller life. Like I'm able to look at things through a lot of different lenses, and all of those things help to me. Now I'm talking selfishly, so we're just saying, like, for me as an individual, like I'm like, wow, like my life has become more interesting. Yeah. When I see a certain symbol, it no longer just represents the symbol as a shape; it represents a meaning. It represents an idea being communicated. So whereas the person who was me, let's say 10 years ago, could have walked by the exact same thing and taken nothing from it, now in my day, it's a reminder of an awareness that I now have because of the learning. So the expansion of consciousness ultimately is what inspires me. Guys, as Jenny said it best, we got one life. And we're living it. You know what I'm saying? Yes. This is it. Like, consciousness is a blessing.
Yes.
You know?
So right now I have I always give a tip to all up-and-coming artists, up-and-coming designers, because as artists, I like to stick together and, keep that energy up, because sometimes we do have dips, and when there are dips, it's hard to get out of that. So what will be your one tip, if you can sum it up in just a quick sentence, for both of you, starting with Jennifer?
Yeah, for me, closed doors are sometimes blessings. I think as artists, we struggle with doors being shut in our faces or things not working out. But we found in our journey that it's always something better beyond that. There's always that turn that makes it the right turn for the path and the trajectory we're supposed to be on. And it sort of catapults you forward. So I wouldn't always look at rejections or closed doors or things shut in your face as reasons to stop, right? It just means you shift your focus, and oftentimes that's what leads you to greater success.
That's great advice. I would say that if I were to leave anything with other creatives, so much to think about. Probably the one little nugget would be like, okay, so you're on a mission and you have a drive, right? And all of us who are trying to build success, as Jenny was saying, we're looking for how do we build on that next thing, right? But what I think we sometimes miss is we'll say, if I just had a marketing agent, then I would be a success. Or if I just had funding, it would be a success. Or if I just had someone who knew how to do the following. But I think what we miss in that process is that as a creative, you run your energy in terms, it's almost like we're spiritual people, right? And the art is our manifestation. So the people who are most likely around you also share that same thing. Tell them, collaborate. Be like, hey man, here's what I'm working on, here's what I'm doing. Or hey, my sister, like, could I get help in the following thing? And then once you've done that, have faith that those people are going to deliver. So they may not have the skill set right away, but if their energy is in the right place and you guys understand one another, they're going to go and educate themselves to the degree that's necessary in order to deliver. So always look at your family, look at your friends, look at your community, work together. And it's not always about you. A lot of times the work is doing for them. And it always, in our experience, it always comes back. And by the way, many times more than what you give. You won't see it at the time, but it always comes back.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being on the Sir Winston podcast.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much, brother.
We're here at the Salt Mine Studios. I think this is room, what is this, Studio A?
Yeah.
So, thank you for Don Salter for having us here at the Salt Mine.